Morning, everybody. It is 8:10 a.m. It's April 28th. Welcome to my channel. Obviously, every weekend brings news. Secretary Bessent was talking about China, kind of putting a little cold ice on China talks like Trump's talking about. Then China says we are in no trade talks with the U.S. at all. Who the hell knows what's going on? So on Friday, the markets like broke downtrends, went above the 2024 anchor VWAP, and closed above there, right? Initially, just kind of was trading in a range, then broke out, and then got some selling, and then kind of just like hung out near the highs. So we have to see if we get follow through this week, basically. Now, this week, we have a ton of data, all right? We have non farm payrolls, and we have a bunch of big earnings this week, all right? This week's going to be, could be very volatile, okay? Very volatile week. So, without further ado, let's get into this. All right. Welcome to my channel. My name is Steven Gonzalez. I use market profile, volume profile to find structure in the markets, along with supply and demand, gamma exposure levels, the most traded price of the year, the month, the week, and the previous day. That's my edge. It's the way I look at the markets, and I hope to share that with everybody. Okay. Also use market internals. Now, my market internals give me the what's going on in the guts of the market, underneath the hood of the market, and they really aid me into deciding which strength I want to go with that day. Now, once the VIX went under 30, now my internals, my bread and butter, helps me make more decisions, because before, when you're over a 30 VIX, the internals are they're still accurate, but they change violently. So it's not like it's a slow grind. You can, okay, I want to go with the strength today. It could be like really bullish looking, and the next minute it looks bearish. So I've had a good trading week last week. So I had a couple good trades on Friday. I had a good trade on Thursday. Um, I'm sorry, Tuesday I think it was. Last week I can't remember. But good trading week. So internals are back in the mix. They're really feeding my edge. So that is that. Now, hopefully, you join me every day. I give you the mornings. I give you the market story basically every day. Okay, along with market news, economic calendar, the obviously the earnings calendar, the leaders and the laggards, just the latest news. Okay, and try to give you scenarios, right? So later on, I go over daily charts, the triple-headed monster. That's your bond market, your dollar, and the VIX. And then I go into ES and NASDAQ futures analysis, where I give you long and short trade scenarios. Okay? And of course, when the market opens, I might have new scenarios, but only because nobody knows the data from the open. I don't know what sector will be leading, what sector will be lagging. Okay? So, with that being said, why don't we get right into futures and see what's moving markets? All right? Now, this morning, we have a VIX that's up 3.02%. We are at a 25.54 VIX. All right, Ethereum's up 0.44. Gold is up 0.30. The dollar is up 0.08. The 10-year yield is basically flat. 30-year bonds are flat. Silver is down 0.13. Bitcoin down 0.13. Dow's down 0.15. ES down 0.21. Nasdaq down 0.26. Russell down 0.32. And the crude is down 0.35. So kind of muted. Nothing real crazy here. All right, let's look at the Mag 7 Plus here. Who's leading the pack today? That is Boeing. Boeing's leading the pack, followed by Meta. Meta has earnings this week. Tesla. Tesla's up. I did take a nibble on Tesla way back. Um, that is in profit. So happy about that. If we get lower, I will add more, but that's looking good. Amazon's up 0.19. Now, let's go to some laggards here, okay? Coinbase down 0.42. AMD down 1%. Broadcom down 0.125. Eli Lilly down 1.53. And Nvidia down 1.61. The laggard. Now, the laggard there is because Huawei, the Chinese basically mobile device, or like a Huawei there, is working on a chip that's going to try to compete with NVIDIA in China. So that's not a good thing for semis this morning. Okay, that's what's going on there. Now, if we go to the sectors, right, let's look at this environment here. All right, staples, nothing's up today. So, but the defenses are flat, defensives. Even discretionary with Tesla up is just flat, right? Laggards, go to the bottom three here. Energy down 0.21, technology down 0.36, the largest sector weighting in the SP 500, and semiconductors is the laggard. Usually that's a risk on, risk off asset. They're down 0.69. Okay, I think we're ready for some economic calendar and some news, earnings calendar. All right, so why don't we get into that? Got a stacked economic calendar this week. A lot of data. Okay. Today's light, Dallas Fed at 10:30. Tomorrow we have JOLTS jobs, consumer confidence, API crude. All right. Wednesday we have GDP. All right. Chicago PMI. That's interesting. PCE is at 10 a.m. Do I have the right time zone here? That's weird. It usually comes out at 8:30. That's interesting. I don't know if that's a mistake that it's going to come out at 10 a.m. But core PCE, okay. Thursday, initial jobless claims, ISM data, and Friday, non-farm payables, unemployment. Okay, so big week of data. Okay, big week of data. If you want to look at earnings this week, let's go over it. Domino's Pizza reported this morning. MGM reported this morning. After the close today, Waste Management. Let's see here, Transocean. All right, now we've got a big week. All right. Before the open tomorrow, SoFi, PayPal, UPS, JetBlue, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Royal Caribbean, Spotify, Altria. Okay, Altria. So that's the ones that I'm going to mention just for here. But the big ones this week, okay, big ones this week: Starbucks, Visa, Caterpillar, and Microsoft. Microsoft, Meta, Qualcomm. Microsoft, Meta, Qualcomm, Eli Lilly, Mastercard, McDonald's, right? Amazon, Apple, Atlassian, Exxon. Those are the big boys. All right, so we'll go back to that every day, and I will give you the earnings for the open for the next day. What's going to happen the day we're on at the close? Okay, we'll do that every day. All right, let's go back to here and just look at some news. All right. All right, what do we have? It says exclusive. Some Amazon sellers are pulling out of Prime Day amid Trump tariffs. It says investors worry big oil could reduce share buybacks as crude prices slump. U.S. aviation industry slammed by tariffs seeks exemptions. Unions warn on jobs as Airbus reaches Spirit Aero factory deal. Domino's Pizza posts surprise fall in the U.S. same-store sales as inflation bites. All right, let's look at this little here. All right, European shares rose as investors look ahead to potential tariff developments. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei rose for a fourth straight session, driven by gains in automobile stocks, while China and Hong Kong stocks consolidated after the Beijing pledged to stabilize capital markets without announcing fresh stimulus to counter the U.S. tariffs. Moreover, the dollar steadied as investors waited warily on news of U.S. trade policy. In commodities, oil prices nudged lower amid economic uncertainty and OPEC supply concerns. Saudi Arabia may slightly increase its crude prices for Asian buyers in June for the first time in 3 months. Gold prices fell as hopes for de-escalation in U.S.-China trade tensions dented appetite for safe haven assets. Okay, um, let's see why Boeing's moving. I don't know how to say this. Riyadh Air CEO Tony Douglas said that the Saudi startup carrier would be ready to buy Boeing aircraft destined for Chinese airlines if they are not delivered due to the escalating trade war between the United States and China. Okay. DoorDash Deliveroo suspended its 133 million share buyback program days after it said it received a 3.6 billion buyout proposal from the U.S. peer DoorDash. Okay. So Meta, Singapore has ordered the Facebook parent to block Singaporeans' access to posts made by three foreigners accused of trying to influence a national election early month on racial and religious lines. All right, Novo Nordisk. The drug maker has launched its hugely popular weight loss drug, Wegovy, in Thailand. An executive at Danish drug maker's local subsidiary said, marking the injectables drug's first entry into the Southeast Asian market. Interesting, right? Just so everybody knows, Eli Lilly came out with a pill form with no injections, so that is really probably denting into Novo Nordisk. What else here? Starbucks, the company's union delegates involved in contract bargaining, voted to reject the coffee chain's latest proposal that guaranteed annual raises of at least 2%, Workers United said. All right. Get some prices here. Alphabet, Raymond James cuts target price to 185 from 205. Amazon, Oppenheimer cuts target price 220 from 260. Let's see. RTX, JP Morgan cuts target price to 145 from 150. All right. Now, a couple things from the juice here. You can see the red. Let's go down to the red here. See, China, around like 3 in the morning here, says there have not been any calls with the U.S. recently. We are not engaged with trade talks with the U.S. That was at 3 in the morning, right? Now, Bessent has been saying a lot of stuff. Um, let's see here. There's nothing red here, though, but he said a bunch of stuff about China. We are anxious not to escalate with China. Chinese exemptions show they want de escalation. See, he's kind of like putting ice on China talks. All right. There's the Nvidia shares dip on Wall Street Journal report that China's Huawei is testing new AI chip. That's the semi news. All right. I think we're done with news. We did economic calendar. I think we can move over to daily charts. Let's do that. All right. So daily charts here. Let's look at the spot here in a daily. All right. So on Friday, what did we do? We broke this downtrend, closed above it. You had this level I talked about. That was last month's lows, 547. We closed at 550. Okay, 550.64. Okay, closed right here. Now there's a gap here. Okay, partially filled it. Okay, partially filled that gap. All right. So, do we get follow through? I don't know. Now, where are we at now? 540. We're basically at 550. We are right close to the highs. All right, so we're accepting higher prices. Okay, let's look at now. Oh, a couple levels here. We got gap fill would be 554. Let's call it 555. Then you have the 50-day moving average and anchor view off from this year around 562. Those are some levels to look at. Let's look at ES. You can see here there's a doji candle right there inside yesterday. We're inside Friday session in futures. Okay, so in futures we're right at this key level. That's last month's lows. Last month's lows. Okay. Next resistance area would be around 57.72. 57.72. Okay. So let's step over to the Qs. All right, so the Qs. This is a secondary trend line. They closed above. Okay. This is your anchor VL from 2024. That was the previous week's highs. Okay, so nice move. QQQ was relatively stronger on Friday. Actually, was long. QQQ. Started out long SPY, then I made a long on Qs, and then it was around 12 something. The market was not strong, and I was like, you know what? I took it off close to the highs, and I said, you know what? I'm not gonna sit and watch a barcode. And then eventually it broke. It kind of had a nice breakout, which I had a nice trade on it, but it would have been nice to have been in that. But here we go. So we closed at 472.56. Where are we at now? 472 basically. So we're right at the highs. Okay, right at the highs. So this didn't have any gap to close like the SPY. So this candle kind of filled that gap here. Okay. 50-day moving average, anchor re up for the year. Let's call it around 480. 480. Okay. Let's look at futures. So we're inside in futures on Friday session. Inside, right? You could see last week's highs. We're underneath last week's highs. So next resistance would be around 20,000. Okay. There is that. Now let's go to your triple-headed monster now. And we'll start with bond market. All right, so the bond market now is starting to become a downtrend. You have a swing high, right? And we're underneath the 20-day moving average. We're right at the anchor view up 2024. Okay, so let's see if we start to push through 200-day moving average. This I would expect to get down to about 3.99. This is kind of poor structure here, so we just have to see all about that. Okay, now looking at the dollar, that dollar is just in a range holding here. Okay, that has made a big move lower. Like I said, I think I said last week that I might be looking for some type of bullish play on the dollar. I don't know, but the dollar is hanging out here. Okay, moving on to the VIX. That's your fear gauge, your hedge gauge. That's 30 days out. That's what that looks at, 30 days out. Okay, so we were in this range for a while. Remember, I was talking about all this high volatility tend to make my market internals not as reliable, right? But once we dipped under 30, now my internals start to, you know, work. My edge is there with my internals again. So, been trading a little more again, right? But that's very important, right? To know when my edge is really there and when it's not. So, and don't get me wrong, there's stuff you do into this thing, but I'm saying like my generalized system was kind of being dented by this big high volatility. All right, but now we're back under 30, so let's just see what pans out. Right now we're at 25.42. We're kind of moving sideways. We're right at last week's lows. All right, so that's what's going on with your triple-headed monster. Now we can move on to market profile, buying profile. I don't know if I'm gonna try to switch this up today. I might try to switch up how I show you the markets, and maybe it might be a little easier on the eyes. We'll try it out. I think today. I think I'm gonna try that out today with you guys. All right. So I'm gonna start off with market profile, buying profile, and you'll notice that I have a double screen of the Nasdaq and the ES. All right, and I'm gonna try to show you the recap, and then I'm gonna translate what I see from the market profile, volume profile, which might be hard to tell or might be hard to see with somebody who's not used to that lingo, used to looking at those types of charts. And I'm gonna show you my analysis on an hourly chart with candles. Okay, let's see how it goes. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so I'm gonna bring you to this chart. Hold on, right here. It's basically what I look at every day. Okay, so if you want to look at the recap, right, we'll go right here. That's what happened on Friday. Okay, and so we opened here. what did we do? We pulled back right into where demand and exactly where I wanted to get long, right in the most trader price of the week. I mentioned this on Friday. Okay. And what I did is right off the open, right off the open, close to it, which I don't normally do, we came right down to a gamma flip point in the SPY in this area, and I bought it. And I rode that up. All right. I rode that up. That initial pop, I took it. All right. And then I got long again when we pulled back all the way in here on the Qs, actually. So when I looked at the ES and the Qs relatively stronger, I got long right in here, and I rode that all the way up to about here. And I said, you know what? This market is not that strong. And, you know, right after that, or maybe around here, I got out, and the market like dipped, and then it pulled back all the way to here, and then ripped up, and it kind of held up here. Okay. All right. So that's what happened. Now you can see if we're just looking at the profiles here, which I'm going to switch over to the hourly chart. But let's put this up here. So this is your market profile, right? All right. So what's we're looking at real quick, right? Real quick. This is last week's high. So 54, let's call it 55.55 is a key level, right? 55.55. You can see in the overnight session right here, we're inside. So let's look at this real quick. So this is considered a confluence high. It's 55.55. Okay. You can see where the overnight session is inside Friday's session. Okay. You could see there is demand zone here. Okay. You can see previous weeks. I don't want to talk about that. Okay. So you can see basically we have a nice low here. Okay. Now originally we opened, and this is the much long activity to this all this much short activity. All that long has been taken out. Okay, it has been taken out. So in here, there's not much nuance that the market profile, volume profile is showing me as much than it normally does, right? So I already told you the key levels. There's supply zone here. Okay. Now we're going to jump over to the hourly chart. All right. Like I said, I normally just do my scenarios here, but just switch it up. Whoever's watching maybe can tell me if they like this or they don't. Okay. So let's do it. So just showed you some levels in the market profile. Now, if we zoom out, this is an hourly chart. Okay. Let's put that up there. This is an hourly chart. Okay. All right. So I'm going to zoom out. All right. So we're zoomed out pretty good. All right. So if we just look at this chart, you can see here from the swing low, right here, I have an anchor VWAP, that white line. We have not really tested that at all. So buyers are in control definitely from this area. 53, 30, 55, 50, 53, 33 right there is your month to date anchored VWAP. Why does that look like that color? Oh, that's the wrong thing. All right, so here you got your anchored VWAP. I mean, the month to date anchored VWAP. You have this low's anchored VWAP, the white, all right, which is right there. And then you have this nice move up, and you basically got an uptrend, right? All right. Now, if you look to the left, this 55, let's call it 62 level, this is a supply zone here, and that was resistance on Friday, okay, in futures, okay, that was resistant, all right. And you can see here, I'm going to point out a couple other things. This is the anchored VWAP for this year. This is the anchored VWAP from the all-time highs. So the average seller is still in control from all-time highs. Okay, that's what that tells us. So let's zoom in now. We get right into these scenarios here. Okay. Okay. So let's do it. Okay. So where are key levels? Now, I don't need the market profile, right? This obviously I can look at candlesticks. So we have a demand zone right here, right? We have a supply zone and last week's highs right here. All right. This trend line, I might have to readjust it, but you got demand, supply, and then you got right here the most traded price of the week and demand right down here. Okay. So we're kind of just consolidating right here. So basically, you know what? Let me bring this down so we can look at better levels here. So let me redo those levels. All right, so we got our supply zone here. Like I said, it's my first time doing the hourly chart. I just want to make sure that let's make this like this. Just like this. This is a lot better. Be easier on the eyes. Okay. All right. So we have our supply. Right? That was resistant on Friday. That's Friday's highs. Then we have this demand zone here, about 55.30. And we have this support area here, around 54.80, which is the most traded price of the week in demand right here. So this is really what we're working with today, okay? This happens to be the overnight lows, all right? So look at this consolidation, right? So this area becomes very pivotal in the markets. All right, so let's talk about the bull case. And also, we have a gap, an unfilled gap right here. This whole area is gap. That's a void in price. Okay, so if we get into this area, we could definitely push up and close that gap, fill the gap. Okay, so price is right here, and what could happen from here, right? So this is supply. So what I would like to see is you got to break, right? You got to break this area. You can push up, pull back, hold and hold, and then we could possibly fill that gap. That's one, right? That's one. Next, if we sell off, come into this is very key support right here. Okay, that's called 55.20 around, right? If you hold that higher low, this could give the fuel to push up and possibly fill that gap as well. Okay. Now, above this level, I would still say this market has a chance for bulls. Okay, right here, the most traded price of the week. All right, so I wouldn't be crazy about it, because if you did come down, break that demand, and you came down here, this is a good support, right? This is a good support. However, you failed to come up here, and I would think if we did come down here, Yes, could you get a little bounce, but I don't think you're going to move that high. Okay? That's what I'm seeing for the bulls. All right. Now, as far as the bear side, okay, they want to defend this supply. Okay? But there's been one attempt, two attempts. Now, this is the third attempt. Knocking on the door a lot. Okay? So, let's see. If price, that's just right here, comes up here and pushes up to last week's highs, what do we do there? Right? Let's say we do one of these, a bull trap. Boop. Come back, lower high, lower high. This is the most traded price of Friday. If we come through that, you're going to reach this area, right? Around 55.30, this support area. If you break that, your next test is this demand zone around 55.20. All right. If you break that and you start to hold, you're probably going to work yourself down to the most traded price of the week, around 54.75. Okay. Bulls need to defend this. If they don't, that's not good. And if you hold, you can go down to this demand of 54.20. That would not be good for bulls. Okay. At all. You don't want to see underneath that most traded price of the week. Okay. Don't want to see that at all. All right. So that's your ES. Okay. So we'll move on to the NASDAQ. All right. And just like I did before, let's zoom out and look at some levels together. All right. So in the NASDAQ, right, you can see we have an uptrend right there. Again, we have an anchor VWAP from here, month-to-date VWAPs here. Okay, this blue is all-time highs anchor VWAP. We are coming very close to that level right here, right? This is the year-to-date anchored VWAP. Okay, so we're coming very close to this anchored VWAP from all-time highs. Usually, you get some reaction off this level. Okay, so keep that level in mind. That level is around 196.38. Okay, so this is what we're looking at here with the NASDAQ. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. Let's zoom into this NASDAQ. Let's make this chart nice. We really can see some levels here. All right. All right. Let's look at these levels together. Now, as far as what's going on right now, if we just flip real quick to the NASDAQ in the market profile, right? So we can see the overnight session is inside Friday's session, right? Notice that. Now, all these shorts have covered, and we're back here at the open. Open of the overnight at 6 o'clock. Okay. Now, you can see, this is what I want to show you. Like I said, overnight lows kind of line up with this most traded price of the week at 193.50. Okay. Now, wait a minute. One second here while I move this price. I believe that can't be right. This most traded price is here. Just give me a sec here. Trying to see. I'm not being able to see the most traded price here. Oh, here it is. Oop. Right here. Okay, so it's even better. All right, so I'm just marking out the levels for you guys. So this 193.50, most traded price of the week, most traded price of Friday. Okay, and then you have last week's highs, 195.65. You'll see that on my other chart. Okay, just trying to show you. I'm just showing you where the overnight session is. That's why I like using market profile, volume profile, because it breaks it up, right? But now we know that we're inside, right? So we'll move back over to the hourly chart and we'll come up with some scenarios now. Okay. So we know we have supply here lines up with last week's highs. Now this supply was formed basically on Sunday night's open. So this is the supply zone, right? And then I talked about we have a demand zone here and another one that lines up with the overnight lows. This is the most traded price of Friday and of the rolling week. That's our levels to watch. And then we have another support here, right here, with this demand zone. Okay. And we have right here is the anchored VWAP from the all-time highs. From the all-time highs. So that could get tagged today. And there will be reaction, meaning you probably get a little wick down, and then we could go close above it, but that usually gets a reaction. All right, so let's get right into the bull case. Okay, so price is here, right? We're inside this demand zone. All right, you can see we're right here, and you can see if you just put a little trend here, we're trending up, right? So you want to see how this reacts to last week's highs right here around 195.90. All right, so you want to see if this can push up, break that, maybe even tag this anchor VWAP. And then for me, once you break that, I'd want to see some type of holding last week's highs, and then you can move up. Okay, that's one way. Okay, that's one scenario. It's moving up. You can see we're going to probably break this little bit of resistance here, right? Another thing can happen is you can move up into the supply, come down. You could come down to see where this trend line, right, hits this support and this, like I said, this area particular holds it, higher low, and you can really see us make a move up. All right. Now, if you lose this area, right, you lose this area and you come down to this area, I would say you want to hold that. But if we do come there today, that's not a great sign for today, right? For today. So we come down here, we could maybe bounce and we'd probably hang out here, right? But these are the two scenarios that I would be in favor of. Okay, do we get follow through today? I don't know. That's why we do scenarios. Okay, so let's look one more time at the bearish case here. Okay, so this is supply, right? So we're in it now. What could happen, right? Come in here, we can hit last week's highs. Maybe let's say we even tap this anchor B up from the all-time highs. People take profits, lower high. Now, where are we going to target? This demand. Come into this demand. Next, this support, 194. Now you're going to battle the most traded price of the month and Friday. Okay, this is very important. If you break that and you find acceptance below this price, we're going to test here 192. And this is where it can get really hairy and break through that, and you're going to go to the most traded price of the month, which is 190. Okay, or it holds and we just bounce. Okay, it's kind of what I'm looking at today. All right, but Mondays are kind of squirrely. Sometimes you got to adjust. Now you can see the volume here is not high today. That is low. 39% of relative volume in the ES, 55%. This is very low volume compared to what we were doing. Okay, so just be aware of that. Be aware of that. All right. So that's it for today. That's That was me showing you market profile on and in conjunction with an hourly chart. Don't know if that was easier on the eyes. I'm assuming it was. Leave a comment or let me know if you enjoyed that more, or you'd rather me go back to the way I normally do it. So anyway, we have our plan. Now, if you enjoyed that analysis, please smash that like button. That would mean a lot to me. All right. And of course, as always, hopefully you join me every morning and I give you the market story. Okay, leaders and the laggards, the market news, the economic calendar, right? And I just gave you long and short trade scenarios in the ES and the NASDAQ. All right. So we have to see when the market opens what happens. Who's strong, who's weak. You got that negative news for semis, right? You got China saying that there's no talks at all happening, and we're at a crucial level. Okay, so who knows? And this market is susceptible to headline risk, so it's not an easy market. This week has a slew of important earnings. Okay, I don't know if I'd be a fan necessarily of, for myself, swing trading when all these things are going after the market, before the market, data. I don't know, right? I think I want to see this week shake out. And can you miss something? Yeah, of course you can. Okay, but there's just so much data this week. It's crazy. All right. So anyway, that's it, everybody. Hope everybody has a great day. Stay green. No trades to trade. And I'll see you.